right, Thomas, if you could again, could you tell me your name and where we're at?
Okay, my name is Thomas Northup. I grew up in this house, 1308 Revere Road, and I live in High Point now.
Thomas, do you remember moving into this house or being some of the first, your first memory of being in this house? Do you remember that?
Well, I grew up in this house my whole life, so I don't ever remember like a time when I came here. I mean, it just felt like I was always here.
Did your father ever talk to you about the house in particular, or architecture, or the history of the house and within his studies in architecture?
My dad never really talked a whole lot, so you really never knew how he felt. I think I did, being his son, but he was really a pretty quiet type person.
Could you describe a typical weekday evening in the house?
I guess thinking back, I kind of remember like when we were in school, high school, and the house, it seems so small now, but then this room right here felt like a gymnasium, and we would like run through the house. There used to be two chairs set up like right here, and a TV in this corner, and my dad was usually like right here in his chair, watching a basketball game or something, and everything else we were just kind of running around crazy in here.
And that would be most any day, not just like a Saturday.
Right. That'd be almost any day.
Okay. Did you have any particular possessions or a piece of furniture in this house or in your room, or that was specific to Thomas that you remember with fondness? Or
Yeah, so I had the one of the rooms downstairs, and I think all the furniture I had that I remember having was built by one of my uncles. I had a bunk bed down there and a desk.
would the bunk beds obviously gave you a sense of being a guy? I had bunk beds. I love that. My sister got kicked out of the room. But did you arrange your possessions in any way based on the shape of the room or the furniture you had? Was there any memories of that?
No, I mean they were placed. They were placed where they were before. Really without my knowledge, really wasn't any room to move anything around.
The closets, did you have closets downstairs or are they all upstairs?
Yeah, there's a small closet in both rooms downstairs.
Were they big enough or big enough to play hide and go seek in or
Yeah,
for your clothes?
yeah. I mean they were plenty big, and I guess maybe back then they'd be considered small closets today, but maybe back then people didn't have as many possessions as they do today.
Tell us about your bunk beds as a boat.
Yes, describe how you might use your
Okay.
bunk beds in other ways other than sleeping.
Um, yeah, I think we would usually pull the mattresses off of them and use them, different ways or play on them. They sort of became a play gym down there.
Could you rephrase to start that again and say the bunk beds at the top of
Okay.
that? Yeah.
Yeah, the bunk beds that I had growing up, we kind of used them as a play gym. We would pull the mattresses off of them and um, pretend that we were using them for different things.
How soundproof were the walls in this house? Were you able to get away with things, or did your parents often catch you guys up to no good or mischief, or
Um,
and children mischief?
r- right. I think our parents would. I think I think they kind of. I think you could hear everything in this house. I remember when the phone used to ring and it was for me. They would just take a broom and pound it on the floor to let me know that I had a phone call because I could hear the phone ring, and I would run up and get the phone. Um, so I think, growing up, I think our parents probably did hear us quite a bit and chose to ignore us.
Oh.
When you got into high school, you didn't have windows per se in your room that would open, but you had a door near. Were you able to get friends in and out of your downstairs?
Yeah, yeah. I
You
mean,
got you got Your mom wanted to know the answer to that.
Yeah. Yeah, the door. I don't know what they were thinking when they put the door right by my bedroom. You know, obviously they didn't think I'd ever grow up and become a teenager. But yeah, it was pretty easy to slip in and out of there at night.
It was also your room was close to the creek, I believe. Is that correct? You're kind of close to the creek. Was the creek a Thomas getaway place? Was that your go-to spot down here when you were much younger? Not maybe a teenager, but when you were younger. And then speak up as a younger child.
Okay. Yeah, as a younger child, the creek, that was like I used to just spend hours down in the creek, and it was a big draw for all the kids in the neighborhood. We would just walk up and down the creek, usually in boots, but sometimes we just wear our tennis shoes and catch crayfish, and we build dams down there. So it was sort of like a playground growing up.
Did you find that this house was an attractive place for neighborhood friends and kids to come to? I mean, did you guys have gatherings here with your buddies? Or, I mean, when I grew up, it seemed like every kid on the block, we got in one yard and hung out until the sun went down, but I didn't know. This seemed like a magical place. Did kids come here and hang out with you? And if so, how did you feel about that? And talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so growing up, this house looked so unusual in this neighborhood. I remember, a lot of the kids loved to come down here, and the creek was a big draw. And I remember, like, kids walking by, looking at the house, thinking, and that I could, you could hear them say, "Wow, they must be like rich or something," just because of the uniqueness of the house and the way it looked, and it's sort of just so different than every other house in the neighborhood. And we certainly never needed anything growing up, but we weren't rich by any means. We weren't the Rockefellers or anything, but.
Well, there's plenty of testimony to the fact that regardless of the monetary units involved, that there was a richness in this house that cannot be equaled beyond the love y'all were given. I don't know. That's just one to share that with you. I've heard that. If you want to talk about any of that.
Okay, yeah. As far as the richness, I remember my mom always saying, "We're rich in love."
Wow.
She would always say that.
Now, I've also heard your family members talk about the time when it came to eat. If you talk about dinner time a little bit, or supper time rather, dinner time after lunch, dinner time supper time, when everybody's around, and was there a time that everybody came to eat? And if you could talk about your experiences being the hopper, or how that evolved, how somebody was chosen to be the hopper.
Yeah, it seems like maybe we took turns setting the table or doing some of the chores around dinner. We would always, I remember after dinner, one of the chores that both of my sisters had, and I was the only boy. My chore was take out the trash, and their chores were do the dishes after dinner. So they would always complain that all Thomas had to do was take out the trash. And I remember, growing up, we would, my mom and dad had some real good friends who were Japanese, or at least the guy was Japanese, and he married an American lady. But so they had gone to Japan several times when they were younger and enjoyed the Japanese culture. So we all had, I think our Japanese friend family that we used to go to the beach with every year, they had given everybody Japanese kimonos. So they were the big robes, and we would wear the big robes and cook sukiyaki at the table. And that was a lot of fun. And really the main thing I remember from that is the cord from the sukiyaki. It was like a electric skillet that had a cord and had to run over to the wall to plug in. My dad would cook spinach in it and steak and all these different Japanese types of food for sukiyaki. And one time Jan was trying to step over the cord and kicked the cord and knocked the sukiyaki off the table. So I think the reason I remember that so well is because we reminded her of that every year after for the next 30 years.
Did you, in your father's workshop, were you ever one to help him on his projects?
Yeah, we used to. My dad had his own workshop downstairs, and he mainly made pottery in it. Growing up, I remember him being in there till midnight, making pottery. I mean, I guess I had already fallen asleep, but he'd be down there making pottery, and he would enter the Piedmont Craftsman's Fair every year, and sell his pottery. And I remember one year they had where the kids of the artists got to sell as well. And so I went in there and made a whole bunch of stuff out of pottery as well. And that year, I put my stuff up for sale there. And I felt like, I had sold everything. Maybe looking back on it, maybe everybody's just buying everything to make the kids feel good. But it seems like I remember selling everything and doing pretty good and getting, a few dollars for all the stuff.
Do you continue this day in any form in the art world, or do you still go to museums? Do you appreciate art, buy art? Are you creating anything? Anybody in your life?
As far as art, my family was real artsy. My mom worked in a museum as a curator over at Renolda House, and my dad was really an artist at heart, but he did architecture, for a living. I don't think I really got the art gene quite like they had it. I still appreciate it, and I still know. I think I still know a whole lot more about architecture and art than probably the average person who didn't grow up around it.
Do you remember in the younger days with possibly Dottie B and Jan and some trouble y'all might have got into in the kitchen at one point?
Yeah, I definitely remember. Quite a few times Dottie B would sleep over, and it was on. We were so close in age. It was like we were triplets, and we would always start off sleeping in Jan's room. All three of us. We'd always start off in there, and we had like maybe makeshift beds out of blankets and pillows and stuff. But we would just sit around and giggle and laugh all night long. And usually my mom would be talking on the phone. It was right there in the kitchen, and we would be listening in on her conversation. And I remember one time in particular, she said something like Lois is leaving or something to that effect. And then between the three of us, we just kept repeating it over and over and just laughing and giggling. So the night would always start off with us three in there beside each other. And as the night went on, they would kick me out and send me back downstairs to my room. And then I don't know what happened after that, but I think I remember one time that they were actually separated because Jan and Dottie B wouldn't be quiet after even I was kicked out. And they put Dottie B in the bed with my mom and dad. And I think maybe to this day she may be in therapy still about that.
And then the Eames chair, or also the chair you're sitting in, you want to talk a little bit about that?
Okay. Yeah, this chair used to sit right here in this corner, right there. And whenever you did something bad, we referred to it as the mean chair, and you were put in the mean chair for a timeout. So my mom and dad didn't believe in corporal punishment. So, they were kind of ahead of their time as far as that goes. And you were put in the mean chair, and looking back on it, you think it's not that bad of a punishment, but I remember we would just cry and cry over having to sit in the mean chair. We just have to sit there, and you had to be quiet, and you couldn't say anything. And it seemed like we were probably in it for 5 minutes, but it seemed like an hour.
Do you remember making crackers and grape Kool-Aid one day? Is that a particular memory that you could talk about?
Well, we kind of grew up on Kool-Aid, so Kool-Aid was something we had all the time. And, I kind of remember hearing some stories about that event, but it seemed, sort of like it seemed like a lot of events that would happen, and we would do something and get in trouble. And a lot of times my mom would volunteer. She would either be working at Reynolda House, or she would volunteer at for mental health. I think she got a few awards doing that. And so it seemed like she was gone a lot, doing good things. And she would leave us with my dad. And my dad wasn't really the one to, take care of kids. He'd rather sit here and watch a basketball game or a football game. And so usually he'd be the one who would end up catching us with a stack of cookies in our hand that we shouldn't have, right before dinner, or spilling something and, having to clean up, and we're running away, trying to get away, and he'd be in there mopping it up,
Instead of doing his art. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
Anybody else? We talked about the creek. Any other fond memories of the creek you'd like to share, or Christmases, birthdays? Oh, were you part of the group that had to put the swimming pool in the creek, the kiddie pool down there, and make your little area, or was that a Lisa story?
I don't know. We always referred to the little part of the creek right there next to the tree, and there's a big rock there. We always sort of referred to that as the deep end, the deep area. And it's like, it would be like up to your ankle right now. But I think maybe it used to be a little bit deeper. But on the other hand, we could have been a little bit smaller. But almost every friend who came over would fall in that part right there. It was like a reoccurrence. And they'd have to come in and change clothes and get some new shoes. But it was almost every time a new visitor would fall in that part of the creek.
I was gonna say, did the house feel big enough for you? You just described how it seems gigantic when you're a kid. Were the hallways wide enough when 3 kids went running through it, or like if you're playing tag or whatever? Was it a nonstop?
Yeah, they were.
Roller rink.
Yeah, the house really just seemed huge. Looking at it now, it just seems so teeny, but back then it seemed huge, and we never had a problem with getting around in it. Everybody could run up and down the hallways, and this area felt like a gymnasium. I remember Jan was a cheerleader growing up, and I played football, and she would actually cheer for me at my football games. And so, like at night, my dad be in here watching TV or watching some type of movie, and I'd be with Jan trying to practice a cheerleading move or something, swinging her around me or something like that, right here in the living room.
Did the abundance of light strike you as a younger man when you were living here? Like, was that just something that you took for granted, or was there one day when you had one epiphany or some sort, and you were just like, oh my gosh, look at how beautiful this place is, and the light that comes in? I mean, when you go to somebody else's house, maybe it happened, but
yeah, so the way the house is and all the windows and the light, I never knew anything different because I grew up in this house from day one, as far as I can remember. And so when I see a house now, and I guess even growing up, when I see a house that's like a mid-century modern type house, I always notice all the glass. I could tell what my dad was, the effect he was going for, later on, now that I'm an adult.
do you think, or could you evaluate and describe maybe how living in this house affected your choice of your different houses you lived in after you moved out of here? I mean, was it a factor like, wow, I can't live here, there's not enough windows, or I need more floor space? Or
Yeah, as far as affecting, what I chose later, I don't think it had a huge effect. But I always thought it was interesting. Like, I had a condo in Arizona when I was stationed there in the Army. And then, the house I live in now in High Point. I always thought it was interesting when my dad would come out to see us, and we would usually run around and try to find like a Frank Lloyd Wright house to see while he was there. And I was always interested in how he would comment on maybe the texture of the walls or something. You know, his view. I always was real interested in his architectural view of everything after that. Just knowing that, you know, that he was an expert, you know, at it.
Did you help him? I was at one of his the Botanical Gardens show that he brought some cement sculptures over at years ago. It wasn't the '90s. I'm sorry. Was it? Yeah. Did you help him with any of his shows, or you were gone by then? You were an adult and on your own mostly. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. When he started doing his sculptures, you know, I joined the Army in '83, and he may have started maybe a little bit before that, or somewhat interested. He did all kinds of different types of art, but I was always amazed at the amount of energy and persistence he had at creating all these things. Even growing up, he taught me how to play chess, and I used to play chess with him. I don't think I ever beat him. He always beat me, and I remember he would just take forever to take that next move, and I just couldn't take it anymore. You know, I was like, you're just waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting, and then finally he'd just do like a brilliant move, you know, and he just had so much patience. He would set up card tables here in the living room, and he'd do these 5,000 piece puzzles on them. You know, he just had so much patience and stuff, and that translated into his artwork where he would make these sculptures, and it was just really labor intensive, just making all these things. You know, you only see maybe 10 of them out here now, but he's probably made 50 or 60 of them or more. As far as actually helping him with that, it seemed like, you know, I was already gone, and he was making these sculptures, and him and my mom would deliver them to their friends as far as Canada. They would put them in the station wagon and drive them to wherever they lived and deliver these sculptures to their friends.
Would you like to comment on how you feel about your father and his influence on your life and the love, and your mother as well? We're talking about your dad right now. If you could continue talking about your dad and his continuing influence on you.
Yeah. So the influence my dad had on me was huge. I mean, he was really sort of a to yourself type person. He didn't talk a lot. As I grew up, all three of us are adopted. So we were chosen. You know, they didn't have to get us. You know, so they got my older sister first, and she was born in 1960. And then if that wasn't enough punishment for them, they went out and got twins after that. And me and my sister were born in 1963. So, you know, I mean, my dad was, he was a really neat person. He was really, as I grew up and started realizing like what was happening, I think some people thought maybe he was sort of mad or mean because he just didn't talk that much. You know, he just wasn't a real outgoing person with people. But once you got to know him, he was like really great person, and he liked to come up with sort of wise comments, you know, and I think I got that from him. I do the same thing. And I remember my mom would sort of get tired of his wise comments that he could keep coming up with. And my wife does the same thing. She kind of gets tired of my wise comments that I'm able to keep coming up with, sort of like him. But, I think I learned a lot of stuff from him, you know, how to handle stressful situations, how to remain calm. He was just the most calm person that I can remember. I remember one time we were in this house and there was a huge storm outside, and it was just lightning and thundering, and the trees were moving back and forth. It was just pouring down rain. In this house with the flat roof, you can just hear the rain whenever it rains. You know, it's just really loud in here. And me and him were standing at this window right here looking out. And he said, looks like somebody made the rain gods mad, or something like that, something to that effect. And right then, a tree fell and actually stuck through the roof. It actually, pierced the roof all the way through. And water just started pouring into here. And then the lights had like gone out at the same time, or they had just gone out. And I couldn't see anything. And I was still standing right there where it was dangerous. And then it lightened again, and I looked, and I could tell my dad had backed way up. And I was like, I should have backed way up. I'm a big dummy, and so I backed up, and then he said, run out and get a trash can, because water was just pouring into the house. So I ran out and got a trash can and brought it in, put it underneath it. And, so we, I think maybe the lights came back on, or it got light enough. Our eyes adjusted to where you could see. And it was like looking in the trash can, there was nothing in it. And I picked it up, and there's a big hole in the trash can. So all the water was just going straight out of the trash can. And I ran out and got another one that didn't have a hole. And it started filling up with water because it was just pouring in. And then we started mopping the floor and maybe putting towels down or something. But I remember the trash can was getting so full and it was so heavy you couldn't even move it. So my dad said, go get the hose. I was like, okay. And he put the hose in there and he siphoned it and got it running to where the hose was like running through the house and it was siphoning the water out. And, I thought, well, that's a good idea. I had no idea that you could even do that at that time. But, yeah, so that's one memory I have of the house.
Could you, because she's sitting here and also she was with him before you mentioned her, could you talk about your relationship with your mom, Aunt Marjorie?
Oh, yeah.
And then the love in this house again, by bringing that all in.
Yeah, as far as, so that was sort of about my dad and my mom growing up. She was just always really loving, and she just had the patience, of a saint. There's definitely a special place in heaven for my mom. She was just so patient with us, even when we were running around, crazy, and even in our teenage years, when we were getting into a little bit of trouble. She was able just to stay so patient and, just sort of be there for us. She was just always sort of the rock, of the family. So even my dad, his patience had a limit as well. And, so she definitely was always held the family together. She kind of did everything, kept everybody together. If you want to know what was going on, she knew. She was taking care of it.
Talk about the backyard and all its many transformations.
We talked about the creek a little bit. Could you talk about your backyard here and some of the many transformations you saw it go through over the years?
Yeah, so the backyard, as far as how it's transformed, growing up, there used to be a big rock terrace out here, gravel terrace out there, and there was a big retaining wall on the other side of it. It was, big stones that had been stacked up. I guess my dad did it, because I just remember it always being there my whole life. But they would do fireworks. They would do fireworks over at the mall. Not too far from here, and you could actually sit on the terrace and see the fireworks. And I remember my aunt and uncle, Dottie and Willard, would drive down from Wisconsin, and they would stay with us. And they would usually come out there, and we'd see the fireworks on the 4th of July and have a watermelon, out there that we would cut. But I guess, there was a couple hurricanes that came through here, and a lot of the trees fell. I think a ton of the trees fell on the house, and they put really big equipment back there to get the trees out, and it kind of just changed the whole layout of the yard. The rock retaining wall, I guess maybe it's underground now, I'm not sure.
Was there a putting green?
Oh yeah, my dad loved golf. So from what I understand, I remember when I was really young, he took me to play golf. and I hated it. You know, I could still run and jump and play basketball, and it was pretty hard too. You know, and so I wasn't really that good at it. He got me my own little set of clubs, but he loved golf, and from what I understand, he was a scratch golfer, and a lot of his friends didn't like to play with him because he was so good. But he put his own putting green back here, and people could see it throughout the neighborhood, and they would come over here and talk to him about it. You know, what type of grass it was, and he just used like some big cans for the holes, like some big, like something you'd buy tomatoes in for the holes, and he would there was 3 holes, and you could putt. So he said there's 6 different ways you can putt 3 times this way and then go back the other way, and it'd be a little different. So and it's ironic now that he took me to golf, and now that I'm older, I love golf. I play it almost every weekend. And I even tell my mom, I wish he would have made me play sooner, and maybe I'd be a professional now. But
So you have a tea time here in a minute. I was just curious. Anything else, Dottie? Jan?
No? Any questions?
No?
Mama?
Would you do, I'm sorry to ask you to do this, Mr. Tom. Would you, the introductions that we did, will you do them once or twice more for me?
all right, sure.
Now that we're all loosened up, and
Okay.
just say, you know, that I'm Thomas, I grew up in this house at 1308 Revere, and, yeah, anytime.
Action.
All right, I'm Thomas Northup, and I grew up in this house at 1308 Revere Road, and I live in High Point now.
I wish I played golf.
Yeah. Well, I do play golf, but I wish I was good. Yeah.
Herbert, anything? No. All right. Well, unless, I guess we're moving on. Moving on.
I'm cutting.